Welcome to the Crook the Book Podcast, where usually three pastor friends discuss the Bible and how it connects to life in local church ministry. I'm Luke Miller, and today I am here with just my coworker and friend Andrew Balich, as our other comrade Jeremy Muncie is away doing important Central District of the Christian Missionary Alliance work with the Licensing and Ordination and Consecration Council. Did I say that right, Andrew? That's what the acronym means?
Just committee. The last C is a committee. Licensing, Ordination, Consecration Committee. Yeah.
I normally just call it LO&CC. So I was like, wait, what does that actually stand for? But anyway, Jeremy's off. He has a good excuse. We're going to give him a pass on this one today. We are, though, going to be discussing Andrew's sermon from this past Sunday, as we often do. So it was from James 5:12. I'm going to go ahead and reread that text for us right now. James writes, "But above all, my brothers, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation." So we'll discuss that in a moment, but just want to remind our listeners, we love to hear from you. We love to hear questions you have, topics you would like to hear us address. You can submit those just by going to our church website, westwoodcma.org, look under resources, click on the Crook the Book Podcast. There's a form you can fill out, and we would love to hear those topics. All right, so back to you, Andrew. How would you briefly summarize the message you preached Sunday?
I'll just recap by giving the main point and kind of the sub points that I offered for us to walk through on Sunday. But I thought the main point of the text was simply speak sincerely and clearly. That's a way to make it applicable for all of us who are followers of Jesus. James' original audience were followers of Jesus. He's telling them in this text to speak sincerely and clearly. And then we walked through really two movements. One from the first part of the verse, talking about unnecessary oaths, and explored what James was talking about when he was talking about not swearing and making these oaths and vows, and what maybe he was talking about. And then after that, talked about the necessary honesty that should be part and parcel of the Christian character. And then tried to conclude talking the motivation there in that verse. Part of the conclusion was that last phrase, so that you may not fall under condemnation. What does that mean? I don't think it's eternal judgment. I think it's the Lord's disappointment in us, his discipline, the rift, if we don't take this seriously, our integrity with our words and our honesty, that those are the consequences in the here and now. And for those of us who love the Lord, that is certainly enough to motivate us, at least under the normal circumstances, to keep us on the straight and narrow when it comes to honesty and how we use our speech. So that's a quick recap, the highlights at least. Yeah.
So something you mentioned in your message was this verse. First reading, it can kind of seem out of place almost when you come across verse 12 here. Like, why would James insert that? Can you just remind us of how this verse connects to the rest of the book and why James may have put it here?
Yeah, I think that it connects with what comes before. There's all kinds of conjecture about what's going on with this verse, but the kind of semi-credible ones are really got three options. Either it's disconnected, it's connected with what comes after, it's connected with what comes before. I think it's connected with what comes before. James has just talked about a warning against worldliness, and he's talked about patience after he warns and kind of rebukes the rich. And then he's talking to the poor. He's talking to those who are suffering. And he says, when you wait on the Lord, there's a certain way that you wait, and you do it, as we saw a couple weeks ago, without grumbling. You wait patiently. You don't take matters into your own hands. And I think this verse 5:12 is an extension of that. It's a specific. The theme of how we speak and how we use our words, what we say, is throughout the book of James. And so it's not really surprising when you think about it that when he's talking about how we wait on the Lord in the midst of trials, tribulations, and suffering, he might say something about how we speak. And I think that's what he's doing here. He's saying those who wait patiently should speak patiently, shouldn't speak rashly, shouldn't manipulate with their speech, shouldn't try to take matters into their own hands with how they use their words, but should rather be honest and patiently wait for that coming day of the Lord, where he'll vindicate, he'll make things right. He will right all wrongs and make all things new, bring us the satisfaction that maybe we have to forego currently because of our present circumstances. So I think it's a continuation of what comes before. And I think the transition is in verse 13, which we'll see next week with Pastor Jeremy's sermon as we kind of are on the final stretch of the book.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. And I just think it's really neat to see how kind of in his own unique way, James really does draw these different themes together, themes of suffering or of facing poverty or whatever, with the other themes of the power of the tongue and just how much good or bad our words can do. It gives you a different perspective, I think, in your own life, how related those things are more than you oftentimes realize.
Yeah, I think,
ahead.
James is, he's been very clear up to this point, and it's just an echo. It's amazing how much, this shouldn't surprise us, but how consistent James is. I mean, all of the New Testament authors are consistent with Jesus, but James at times is just verbatim almost with Jesus' teaching.
Yeah.
And James is teaching again to those who he's writing to what Jesus said, which is your mouth, your words are a window to the heart. It's a window to spiritual realities. It's very, especially when you're under pressure or duress, that's when there doesn't seem to be this kind of wiggle room to get off the hook. Well, I was really stressed out, so I didn't mean what I said. Jesus and James would say, I think what you said is really what you meant. Not that we can't ever overstep, sort of thing. I don't want to be too strong with that, but I think it really does reveal our heart. And when we say we didn't mean it, what we really mean is, I wish I wouldn't have said it.
Yeah.
I wish I could take it back. Not necessarily that it wasn't sincere,
Right. Suffering and stress, whatever you want to say. It's funny. I just had a conversation with someone about this recently. I think sometimes we can use those as, like you said, an excuse. And they are a factor, but I think they're a factor in that they show us what was already there to begin with. The heat gets turned up, and then boils out whatever was already there in your heart. And many times that obviously comes out through your words. But yeah, thinking about the Sermon on the Mount.
It's kind of the way it works with actual temperature. When things get hot, you start to smell what really is there. When it's cold, it kind of suppresses it.
Yeah.
But
the things I don't want people to smell start to smell at that point.
Yeah.
But,
you were saying the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, I just echoing your point. I think that it's Jesus clearly has a lot to say, not just about words, but about how to suffer well in the Sermon on the Mount. And again, that's no coincidence. You drew attention also to how James uses the words, but above all, don't do this. So let your yes be yes. Why do you think James saw this as such an important issue and drew attention to it in that way?
Yeah, that little phrase above all can mean a lot of things depending on context. It might mean this is the most important thing I'm going to say. It might mean just this, hey, this is a really important thing I'm going to say. It might be part of a conclusion. And I think he's trying to grab our attention and kind of give a kind of just a jarring intro, a wake up. Hey, what I'm about to say is extremely important. And I think part of why he's doing that is because we can become complacent when it comes to our words when we don't think it's hurting anybody. What if I exaggerated? So what if I told a half truth? So what if I left that out? So what if I kept that from so and so? So what in this case, if I, made a promise that I don't know whether I'm going to be able to keep or not. The guy was getting money from is rich anyway. He's not going to miss. Not going to it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to cause any harm. And so we think, oh, it's really not that important. When James is saying, no, it is important. Whatever above all means, I think I said this on Sunday, whatever above all means, it's not, hey, go ahead and gloss over this. It's not, don't worry about it. He's trying to say, this is really important. It's significant for your Christian walk. Your words reveal spiritual realities, internal realities of the heart. And so you need to take this seriously, whether you think it's harmless, what you're saying or doing, or not. God's watching, and you don't want to fall underneath his condemnation.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think we, and this kind of connecting to my next question, but in our current, society as a whole, but just often in our daily lives and human nature, we severely underestimate the power of our words. I know it's a little bit cliche to say, but I think it really is. It is true. Well, I just said that. I didn't really mean it. You know what I mean? I was just blowing off steam, whatever the excuse may be, or like more to this passage's point, I was under significant pressure at the time. I didn't really mean that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I will ask you.
And I think it has, one of the things, this is, I probably overuse my current situation with little kids and illustrations and the rest, but it's what I'm swimming in. You know what I mean? It's what I experience day to day. And it really comes out when someone's young and their character is being molded and they don't have control over their emotions in the same way. You realize how powerful your words are and how different it is with different people. What I say and how I say it can either wither my children or make them flourish. It can build them up or it can turn so quickly. Whereas if I'm talking to somebody else who's a grown up, who's well-adjusted adult and coping, you know what I mean? Like it can maybe have the same effect, but it just doesn't, you don't see it quite as obviously. But when you're talking with little children, especially, you realize, people don't really change as they get older. They just are better at masking it or coping with it or whatever. And so it would have the same effect with certain people. It's just, they're not going to wear it on their shirt sleeve. So, think about adults as little kids who just aren't letting you know how your words are affecting them. And I think that's pretty accurate. I know it's true in my own life. People say things that hurt and it's like, I'm not going to, drop my head and walk away, but it's not that it doesn't sting, so anyway.
No, that's so true. How would you mentioned how this passage really is a significant testimony to our world right now, or I should say obeying this passage would be a significant testimony just in how our current world is right now. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. I think, like so many of the imperatives in the Bible, so many of the commands, if we were really to be serious about applying this in our life, it would be radical. It would make us look so different from the world. And I don't think this is any different, but I think this is a maybe a unique opportunity because dishonesty, exaggeration, manipulation, half-truths, just not even really seeking the truth in various arenas is really, I think, kind of part of the air we breathe. I mentioned a few of these, but I even think about journalism. The places where we go and get our news. There used to be, you used to either listen to the various networks on TV with news anchors and reporting, or you'd read various publications. And sure, there was always like opinion sections and that sort of thing. But when they were reporting the news, the test of good journalism was truth. Sure, there's always biases, and sure, I'm not disputing any of that stuff, but you could read them side by side and you'd get generally the same sense of what had happened when they're reporting some event because they're after the truth. I don't know that that's true anymore, at least in a lot of arenas. It's more, how can I color this to reinforce what people want to hear, or my own biases, or my own ideology, or what it might be. So just even reporting of facts, you have to cut through so much to get to the bottom because honesty and truth is not valued. I mean, goodness, politics, there's a reason why we have people swear that they're going to uphold the law and all of these things. Not that it makes a difference, but at least adds some level of like, hey, we know politicians are not all about telling the truth all the time. And so we're asking you to commit publicly to doing that. And then bringing people in to the courtroom or under subpoena or the rest, they avoid, because all of a sudden now the things that I say are legally binding practicalities to them, So there's the political realm, there's the news realm, but I think it goes beyond. I mean, even just marriage. We take public vows, and we are publicly stating that we're going to stay true to this individual. And if you listen to wedding vows, of course, there's something that we're all shooting for and fall short of to some degree or another. But some of them, really are black and white, yes or no. You know what I mean? Things like adultery. You said that you wouldn't do that, so don't do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't care how you feel. I don't care how miserable your wife is. I don't care how miserable your life is. You know what I mean? Just don't do it. And then we can, as long as you just refrain, then we can be honest, make good on your word. And then we can work through the issue. So there's just a level of people make commitments, and they make commitments and stick with it as long as it's convenient, rather than when it actually costs something. And I think that's what would make us stand out really incredibly. And I think that's what James is really talking about. We talked about this on Sunday. I don't think he's saying you can't be sworn in as a police officer,
right,
or take your vows to become a U.S. citizen, or, become a member of the church and take vows. We're not talking about those kind of special public things. He's talking about in the day-to-day life of the Christian community. Our lives together should be just marked by honesty, such that when I tell you I'm going to do something, I say yes. You can count on that. You don't need anything more. I don't need to grandstand with some kind of special promise. You know that I'm going to follow through. And if I say no, it means no. It goes both ways. And I think, I would just say, reflect on, maybe it'd be worth thinking about and reflecting on, if you're listening to this. Is there anywhere else that you see that in a community? I mean, most families I see don't operate that way.
Right.
And, where else is the world going to see this kind of radical discipleship of following Jesus, if not in the church?
Yeah, agreed. It makes me think of how, I think it's Al Mohler who often says Christians are people of truth, just like in general. You know what I mean? We're people, we care about the truth, we speak the truth. And not to get too philosophical here today, but I think our society, obviously, as we all know, is increasingly convinced that truth is not always an actual thing. And they can have some serious problems in distinguishing truth from just fantasy. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of reasons for that we won't get into. But I just think, again, there's a huge opportunity for us as people who are in probably very ordinary ways, just by actually speaking the truth when we need to and following through and honoring our word. That says something, I think, more than we sometimes realize about how we view the world. So what effect did this passage have on you personally? Or were there any conversations that you had with others that came about from it?
It did have an impact on me personally, because one of the things that we don't really, you immediately kind of have the ability to say that this verse doesn't really apply to me, because we don't really use oaths and vows and swearing and stuff in day to day, at least in a formal sense, like James is talking about. And, I can honestly say I don't consciously lie often.
Right.
I'm not like going out and trying to be manipulative or whatever else, but it was reflecting on drilling down to what all the implications of this are. And there was one commentary I was reading that quoted somebody, I don't even remember who it was, who he was quoting, but he was writing a letter to his dad. They were both pastors. The guy who was writing was a pastor. His dad was a pastor, and he was writing a letter about this verse. And he said, I can honestly say before the Lord that I don't consciously speak falsehood, or it's very rare. I never am thinking, I know what the truth is, but I'm going to say something different, he said, but then when I think about it, he kind of listed some of the implications of it. And one that struck me was, when you're in a circle of friends and somebody tells a joke and you laugh, everybody's laughing. You don't get the joke. It hasn't clicked, but yet you laugh because you don't want to stand out. You don't want to be the one who doesn't get it and looks bad or slow or whatever. He's like, that's dishonest, isn't it? You're faking it. And it was like, man, he's probing his soul to that level. And so it made me kind of start probing my own soul and thinking, there's lots of ways, the implications of being honest and a person of integrity and not misrepresenting yourself. I think that's ultimately at the heart of this. I think you could say, maybe that would have been a better main point than speak clearly and sincerely. Don't misrepresent yourself. I think that's really what's at the heart here. And if you think about it that way, that's what dishonesty is: misrepresenting something or yourself. We do that often. And whether somebody, my wife, says, "Hey, what's on your mind?" Because I'm staring off, and I say, nothing. Well, I was dwelling on something, you know what I mean? Or somebody asked me, "Hey, you look down today. Everything all right?" "Yeah, I'm good. I'm just tired." We do it all the time. You know what I mean? Kind of misrepresenting. And not that there's not some level of acceptability, I think, when, there's not time to get into it with somebody or something like that. But often we reflex to just putting up a protection by misrepresentation rather than being honest and letting people see what's really going on. So that's kind of how it affected me, just thinking through the implications of how this applies. And I did have some conversations afterward. I didn't kind of know. I wasn't super confident, quite honestly, going into this sermon, which is why I probably took way too much with me and went long and made you cut the last song. But I wasn't necessarily confident coming down either out of the pulpit, but I had people. I think it resonated, just the practical fact of being honest and that making us different from the world. And I think it really does cut. It certainly cut me of, being marked by being so truthful and so consistent that nobody would question your word. And I had got several text messages and several people caught me and that was kind of the takeaway that really resonated, that, we think we can improve on this. And we want to improve because we want to be like Jesus and be a witness for him. So that was encouraging.
Yeah, no, I had similar reactions, you know what I mean? Where I think it's just a classic example of how when you preach verse by verse through the Bible, you're going to preach. Like, I'm going to guess if you had been given any text you could preach on, you probably wouldn't have picked James 5:12. But there it was. And I know I had several conversations with folks who were probably as surprised as we were, you know what I mean, and how much they got out of that. I know I certainly was.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we just want to highlight here that we do have another podcast going on. It's the 1-9 podcast. If you're interested in knowing more about that and seeing how the 1-9 Alliance is seeking to bless the Christian Missionary Alliance and what kind of stuff we got going on, feel free to pull up the 1-9 podcast wherever you download them.
I would say one thing on that too. Most of our initial podcasts have been on our core commitments. So if you're interested in we've got 8 core commitments as the 1-9 Alliance. So if you're not a big reader and you don't want to sit down and read 8 articles on different things that we think are important, you can listen to the podcast. That's another way to kind of at the ground level see what we're all about. So I'd commend it as well.
Lots of guest interviews. You'll get to hear from a lot of people you wouldn't normally hear from. It's been really good so far. All right, so a random question today, Andrew, and since it's just you and me, I decided just to focus on one that's more specific to you here. You have spent a lot of your life and time studying the Puritans, and there may be some well-meaning folks out there who wonder why you would do that. Why would you want to spend so much time with dead people from the 17th century or whatever it is? You know what I mean? I would say, did I say that right? I always get that mixed up. Is 1600s the 17th century?
It is, yeah.
It is. Okay, I got it. I was doubting myself there. Anyway, why have you devoted so much of your time to the Puritans?
Sure. I think, I've always been a sucker for history. I've always loved history, and liked it in high school, liked it after high school. I'm that obnoxious person that wants to read all the signs in the museum. So don't take me to a museum if that's not you.
Noted.
Drive my people that I love and care deeply about insane that way. But I've always been a fan of history, and I've always, or not always, but I developed, especially as I was late in teenage years and in college, a love for theology as well. And the Puritans are really an intersection of that. I get to do both things that I love, history and theology, and then added to that, as I read them, they're, I think as a group, I don't know of any group in history that are more helpful or more insightful pastors. And so I read them for the history. I read them because it scratches they can do high theology too. But at the same time, I think it one feeds me, but I think it also prepares me to be and grow, to be a better pastor and grow in pastoral ministry. So I saw something that the Lord, kind of brought into my path at a young age, and something I explored, and I've seen it be extremely fruitful in the various callings that the Lord has placed on my life.
Yeah. So if someone is a reader out there and is interested in maybe starting to read some Puritan works, do you have any recommendations that would be good for a person to start?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So one I would say is, if you have no familiarity with the Puritans and you're thinking, okay, they started the United States, and that's the extent of what you know of, kind of thing. I would say don't actually start with a Puritan work itself. One thing I would recommend for those of you who are watching, you'll see this, but it's called A Quest for Godliness: The Puritan Vision of the Christian Life by J.I. Packer. It's a helpful introduction to the Puritans, and there are standalone chapters that he writes and looks at individual Puritans on different subjects. So he's got a section on the Puritans in the Bible, the Puritans in the Gospel, Puritans in the Holy Spirit, Puritans in ministry, and then he has chapters. So you don't have to, I mean, some of you may see that thick book and think, oh, I'm intimidated. They're bite-sized chunks. You don't have to have a sustained argument throughout. So I would say that's a great way to just get your feet wet and give some concept of what you're going into when you read the Puritans themselves. But then I would very quickly get into the Puritans themselves, and a couple that I would recommend. One is really anything in the Banner of Truth Puritan paperback series. They're abridged, the language is updated. They usually have a helpful intro that kind of tells you what you're getting into. But two from that I would recommend. One is Thomas Brooks' Heaven on Earth. It's on the doctrine of assurance, and which the Puritans are really known for, and sometimes at their best when they're talking about assurance. And the other one would be Richard Sibbes' The Bruised Reed and the Smoking Flax, which isn't exactly on assurance, but it touches that. But it's talking about really the relationship between our justification, or God saving us, our conversion is the words we would talk about, and our becoming more like Jesus, our holiness and sanctification, and what that looks like, and what that means when we don't see it the way we want to see it, how we access the Holy Spirit to accomplish that in our life. And so yeah, Thomas Brooks' Heaven on Earth, and Richard Sibbes' Bruised Reed and Smoking Flax. You can find them cheap in the Banner of Truth Puritan paperback series.
Awesome. Yeah, I have not read Heaven on Earth, but I have read the Bruised Reed, and yeah, that book will bless you if you take the time to read it. All right. Well, thanks, Andrew, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yep.
Join us again in a couple of weeks for another episode. Thanks to our producer, Tommy Bucius, and our music, as always, is by Gregory Allen Isakov. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Talk to you again soon.